7 Days in Sunnington Book 2 by Blue Bastard. Chapter 12, They Speak to Me Like Constellations. Sunset wanted to hide, so he wanted to find somewhere that could provide any kind of refuge from what was going on. Failing that, she just wanted to shrink into nothingness. It wouldn't do her any good. The entire dome was now nothing but a giant Cinerama dome filled with smaller monitors, each one seemingly presenting a time when she had been every bit the egotistical bitch she loved to cluster as. Everybody, just want to point out, side note, you know that scene of Fall of Starfleet where Belle got to see all of Twilight's bad side before she got to see all of Twilight's good side? That was inspired by this fic. The largest of the images, presented through the mirror itself, seemed to be doing them in chronological order. There was a lot of ground to cover, as the Sideshow of her sins had yet to get to the first homecoming. So, this is what you were up to outside of my reach in this other world? Chastised Celestia. Sunset nearly hung her head. What can I say? I was just a pony with power and potential who thought it was already princess material. She choked on her words. Power and potential. You were an echo of her words to Celestia years ago, when she first shown her Platinum's mirror. Meanwhile, the air ponies just look like to the mirror and makes of shock, horror, and disgust. I hope you don't intend that for be a simple justification for this, Sunset, growled Rainbow. Seriously, you seemed okay, but I never said I was justifying myself, snapped back Sunset. Honestly, is this any real surprise to any of you? I know Twilight must have told you how I publicly humiliated you with pictures. You what? Shouted Applejack, held back by the sudden leverage of her wing unfurled in her face. Easy, Agent, cautioned Twilight. Considering what she's letting us see, what she's done to others in the past, the whole altered pictures thing is minor. Be glad I hadn't pirated a copy of Photoshop back then, Sunset said sadly, or it would have been that much harder to disprove. Here's something I'm curious about, piped up Rarity, turning to Raz. Just how is all of this possible? Rarity gestured to the dome of images around them. From what we've learned, it's one of the more subtle features of the mirror that Sombra installed. Subtle? Rainbow pointed to the ceiling. This is subtle? Well, okay. In execution, it's rather obtuse, but I really don't think Sombra intended to tell any pony about this function, if about the mirror at all. See, when some pony uses the mirror, they're actually tied to it in a way that normal magic users can't detect. And I can, since, well, the mulberry mirror, just as your horn, is still covered in a bubbly mask of dark magic haze. And since I came to the mirror last, it seems it can lay out pretty much everything I'm ashamed of, subtly remarked Sunset. Once he used the mirror, replayed the memory of her summoning somebody else. Maybe Fluttershy? The hair was covered by the raincoat hood, but it wasn't exactly hard to misidentify who had a bust that big in a middle school into the mud on a rainy day while laughing evilly. So, Sombra could look into the dark secrets of any pony who used this mirror, then use it as blackmail of sorts? There sighs Fluttershy. That's the only reason I can think of why Sombra would want to look into other ponies' memories, replied Raz. I mean, if I wanted to, I could tune it to show any part of her head, with her permission, obviously. But its default setting is revealing the darkest parts of one's mind. That's really rare phrasing, you know, pointed out Pinky. Hey, it's what the spell's runes translate into. Just because I'm good with it doesn't mean I actually wrote the laws of magic or anything. Celestia tapped a hoof to her muzzle. Sunset, is this essentially what you did for all the years you were a human, before you came back to steal the crown? Mostly. There were some other things that I did I really, really regret, she confessed, looking away as the mirror now showed the first time she and Flash Sentry kissed. Sunset wondered whether she should tell Twilight about Flash's true nature. Raz, figuring there was a very real possibility to go into territory straight out of a cheap romance novel's most intimate scenes, made a silent command to the mirror to skip any future embarrassing moments with the blue-maned male. The mirror complied, skipping ahead to the first homecoming ceremony. There was a younger Sunset, who looked so happy to have been chosen to wear the homecoming crown. Her smile looked nice enough. And then he spotted another girl fleeing the stage in tears. Her fabulously styled hair dyed a sickly green color. The scenes that followed were all similar. If anything, Sunset's actions proved it was possible to rise and fall simultaneously. The fiery teen selected new depths as she rose to the top of the social ladder. Flying her friends watched with despair as their human counterparts were torn apart by Sunset's manipulations. Sunset's heart beat faster as another homecoming came and went, then another. Before she knew it, Sunset was watching herself return through the portal in a fit of rage as she realized she no longer had the crown she stole. She had Fluttershy cornered against the locker next. That's when her conqueror and her savior appeared. The rest of the ponies watched her stand off with Twilight in rapt silence. All the while, the pit of dread in Sunset's chest grew wider and deeper. Her efforts to antagonize Twilight went by in a flash as the mirror brought them closer to the moment Sunset dreaded the most. It's like it knows. Then the night of the fall formal arrived. As Sunset swallowed, she saw herself standing by the polished marble of the statue, a sledgehammer raised over her head. She saw herself order her cronies to let Spike go. Remembered her words at that moment. I'm not a monster. Ironic, considering what was about to happen. After a brief game of keep away, Sunset Simmer held the crown in her hands and placed it on her head. A chorus of gasps emerged from the ponies around her as they watched the girl in the mirror become enveloped in a brilliant, ethereal column of light. Sunset saw her own face contort in pain, tears running down her face, and all at once she remembered the burning agony and sheer mind-numbing terror as she felt her body was changed. Her tears had evaporated into the air. Floating her in place was nothing short of an abomination. A red, laughing demon with fiery hair and black eyes now floated in her place, a living monument to all her sins. It's horrible, Fluttershy squeaked, attempting to crouch behind her friends. Don't worry, assured Raz. It's only an image. It can't come out and get any of us. Just a ghost of the past. One determined to haunt me for the rest of my days, it would seem. Sunset thought as her counterpart in the mirror began her, admittedly, poorly conceived plan to brainwash the entire student body for her war against Celestia. Of course, that had never been her endgame before she put on the crown. She just hoped that Celestia would have the wisdom to figure that out. Oh! Pinkie shrieked. Sunset returned her attention to the mirror, just in time to see her very literal past demon launch an attack at Twilight and her human friends, only to be blocked by a magical barrier that appeared around them. Oh, you! Pinkie, I think the fact that I'm standing here right now indicates pretty strongly that I survived. So I said, a complete deadpan. Aww, you ruined the surprise. Sunset doesn't ignore them. Eyes glued to the mirror as it showed Twilight and the others rising in the air, taking in the power from the element of magic. She watched as her demonic counterpart was blasted by a swirling vortex of rainbows, a sobbing mess at the bottom of a huge crater. Suddenly, the image flickered before fully vanishing, leaving the mirror's surface nothing but a reflection of the ponies in front of it once again. Similarly, the dome was plunged back into darkness, the windows into parts of Sunset's early human life vanished from above. That's strange, commented Raz, her gaze assessing that she wasn't focusing on anything in sight. There's some sort of blockage Demir's encountered. I could try to work around it, but only if you want to show anything else, Sunset. Well, I think I've seen enough, snorted Rainbow, stepping to the front. While the other four ponies behind her seemed to agree, judging from the tone of their murmuring. They also sounded somewhat uncommitted. Oh, come on, girls, groaned Twilight. I know you all could be more respectful of the big picture here. Plus, aren't you forgetting why Sunset came here and tried to kick my butt? Added Raspberry. I think it's safe to say there's a clear difference between the Sunset we saw in the mirror, the one that allowed us to see in full, and the one here with us now we've all interacted with. Does you agree? But how do we know she's for real? Karen asked. For all we know, her claims that she's now friends with our other counterpart selves could just be her trying to cover her tush. So Twilight, Rainbow's loud mouth was suddenly silence. All her attention now focused on glaring angrily at Applejack, whose host still gripped the spectrum-hued tail hairs of the Pegasus. I, for one, am willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, said Applejack. I think there's still a whole year's worth of advance we haven't seen yet. Exactly, Raspberry said. I just need some time to readjust the mirror settings. Pinkie raised her hoof high. You take a potty break? I really gotta go. And without waiting for an answer, the pink pony zipped away, disappearing to the other side of the dome. I do believe we could all use a little time outside for some fresh air, suggested Celestia, to which every pony else agreed. Oh, I do love it when Celestia is actually used appropriately. When no pony was looking, Sunset quickly darted out of sight, behind one of the many cottages that sat in the shadow of the once great Castle Everfree. She needed to be alone, lest the others see her begin to hyperventilate. Her heart had been racing like a jackrabbit the whole time, and all the stress would possibly end up giving her an ulcer if she didn't vent it somehow. All the worry she had been building up had drained her of much of her body's energy, so taking advantage of her privacy let herself collapse, resting on her side. Suddenly, there was the sound of metal on stone just behind her. May I come in? Asked the voice of Celestia. Never could let me rest, could you? Sunset, not in the mood to immediately jump back into dealing with her former mentor. Her brain not firing at all pistons, she somehow came up with a reply Celestia couldn't make sense of. Magic 8-Ball says try again later. I guess that's a human turn of phrase, postulated Celestia. Sunset rose to a sitting position, but kept her back to the princess. After what they had all just witnessed, Sunset wasn't sure she could bear to look at Celestia's face. The look of calm disapproval alone would be enough to kill Sunset where she stood. As it happened, Sunset didn't have to turn around to look at her old mentor. Celestia moved in front of his chin. Student and teacher were looking into each other's eyes once again. To Sunset's surprise, she didn't see a trace of malice or disapproval in Celestia's face. She only saw the same unfamiliar pony she had glimpsed her first day back. A weary old mare with a mind plagued by millennia of regrets. Do not make the mistake of thinking you're the only one who laments what has come to pass. When Sunset had been unable to meet Celestia's gaze a moment before, she suddenly found herself unable to look away. It almost sounded like Celestia believed Sunset's regret was sincere. Doesn't mean anything. For all she knows, I only regret leaving her because doing so burned my best burst of power. Just like that, Sunset found her eyes drifting away from Celestia's once again. So, assuming Raz can fully restore the mirror's functions, do you think you'll let us look at the rest of your life as a human? Celestia asked, lowering her hoof to regain her regal stature. Sunset's ears flattened as he suddenly found a mark on the ground very interesting. I don't know what good it'll do. It's not like anything I did after homecoming can erase everything I did before. That's true. Even Twilight couldn't change the past, despite her best efforts to do exactly that. A hint of a smile formed on Celestia's lips. Sunset had a feeling there was a story there. All the good deeds in the world can't erase a bad deed. But in my opinion, they always have to. Celestia paused for a moment, carefully considering her next words. Celestia, there are a few forums I know of that will act that if you make one big mistake in any show that you're on, you are to die for your sins. There's no one doing it, there's no moving forward, and there's no redemption. You are to die. Painfully. It was strange to see a pony who always knew what exactly to say hesitate so noticeably. Did you know that sunlight creates your shadow? It's approximately 8 minutes and 20 seconds old. She suddenly asked. Sunset tilted her head, confused by the sudden strange tangent. I always found that interesting. That when you look at your shadow, what you're really looking at is a manifestation of the past. However, no matter how great or small your shadow is, it doesn't really define you now, does it? Sunset's mouth slowly drifted open as he began to comprehend what her old mentor was really saying. Celestia simply turned and began heading back to the Black Dome, briefly stopping to add, food for thought. Sunset Simmer sat in place for a time, her mind a hazy mist as it tried to process all of the thoughts circulating through. It seemed like no time had passed at all when Twilight came to get her. Hey, Sunset, Raz finished with the mirror, she said, taking a step toward her. If you want to show the rest of your human life, we're all ready. Okay. Sunset muttered before straightening up and giving a stern nod. Okay. As the two mares walked in the direction of the large dome of pure darkness, Sunset couldn't help but fidget nervously. Everything she thought she understood about Celestia's state of mind Sully thrown it to the wind. Her anxiousness did not pass unnoticed. Do you want to know the first thing Celestia asked me when I returned from the human world? Twilight asked. Sunset could only look at her and nod once before Twilight answered. Is Sunset Shimmer okay? The others were waiting by the mirror as Twilight Sparkle and Sunset Shimmer entered the dark dome once more. With a nod from Sunset, Raspberry fired up her horn, and the final segments of Sunset's human life began to play out. First thing Pony saw in the mirror's frame was a rickety old building collapsing under the assault of various construction vehicles. Sunset, of course, had to warn them that the next part was going to be in about, several different chapters. So he was going to have to take the time to edit, to fix the focal inflections, make sure everything played right. Hey, this job is not easy, people. So he also had to make sure she kept the voices on track, remember what voices he had to use for which character. What exactly were we looking at here? Applejack asked. My old home. Sunset answered. You mean the building owned by the Flim Flam brothers? When Sunset nodded, Applejack let out a single amused guffaw. As a shocked human simmer looked at the destruction of her home, there a figure approached her. He was a tall, uniformed man who was very picture of authority. As he gave the teenage girl with fiery hair a stern talking to, Twilight spotted the blue stripes in his own hair, and her eyes widened. Is that? My foster brother, Sunset answered, shining armor. Twilight and her friends watched in stunned silence as what were the most important events in Sunset's life played out. Her talks with Officer Armor in the burger joint. The moment she met her soon-to-be foster parents, Principal Celestia's final stern warning. Celestia, the princess, studied her counterpart closely. Her human self had appeared a few times in their earlier viewing of Sunset's life, and Celestia had been briefly amused when it was explained that her counterpart was no more than a high school principal. Now something evidently clicked in the Solar Diarch's brain as she looked at her counterpart now. Sunset, Celestia said, looking down at her former pupil. How much do the humans know about our world? Ah, of course. Sunset figured this line of questioning would come up at some point. It seemed as if Celestia was able to spot some small nuance in her counterpart's demeanor that had been there before. Not much, Sunset replied. Most of the student body retains no memories of my, rampage. The only ones who do remember are the girls that helped Twilight defeat me, as well as your and Luna's own counterparts. Interesting. Celestia's gaze remained focused as he returned it to the mirror. When Sunset could see the gears turning in her old mentor's mind. As Sunset could venture a guess, Celestia was going over possible first contact scenarios and considering the necessary preparations for such an eventuality. If anything, that line of thought helped keep Sunset's mind off of the scene playing out in the mirror. Sunset remembered the immense discomfort she had felt as the principal lectured her. Noted the way her past self was unable to meet her eyes. Not much has changed, evidently. After their last conversation, Sunset couldn't help but wonder how Celestia felt about this particular moment. Another glance at her face showed the same careful indifference she usually reserved for court, but Sunset couldn't help but wonder. Then the mirror jumped ahead to the next morning. For the first time, the main powering counterparts of the Eight Amazing Eight at long last got a glimpse of the actual human counterpart, Twilight Sparkle, along with Vitavia. The two now appeared in the mirror, just as Sunset had seen them that morning, long ago. Well, that explains your, excitement when we ran into Octavia and Melody a few days ago, commented Twilight with a grin. Hold on. Those clothes look familiar somehow, said Rarity, completely oblivious to Twilight's comment. Sunset immediately remembered why. Rarity recognized the clothes, but the mirror didn't give the alabaster fashionista a chance to remember as well as before it skipped to later to see. Sunset was now having a conversation with her friends in Secret Corner's Cafe's upstairs kitchen. Huh? Questioned Dash, seemed to react to the humans on screen to something Sunset had said, taking special note of her own counterpart's reaction, dropping a cookie and splashing milk all over herself. What did you say there, Sunset? Oh, that? I was telling you that I now lived with Twilight Sparkle, or at least the one who was human from the start. She then returned to Twilight, the Unicorn Princess version, with a gleam of admiration in her eyes. While they did befriend Twilight and Tavi soon after this, Twilight is the same to the girls as the one they knew first. You should know that they miss you, Twilight. So, don't think they've forgotten you. Thanks, Sunset, replied Twilight. Her eyes slightly misty as her memories of her time on the human plane came back. Though, I have to wonder, where am I from the human who shares my name? Sunset took the sense to crack a cry, sly grin. Very different. For starters, Twilight doesn't believe in magic. The purple princess's face was priceless. What? The greater part of the next 2 hours involved mainly just Sunset giving narration to the slideshow of her life that was in the mirror. She even had her own audio set up, soundproof room, and everything. This is when she got stabbed by the attack by Lightning Dust and Gilda. Though Rainbow Star's defense of the pony version of Lightning Dust seemed odd, and how that led her to acquiring her beloved bomber jacket in the wake of losing the old black leather one. Then there was the time Sunset put on a little magic show for the children, and ended up becoming a minor hero for finding the wayward grapevine. Though she struck away from Celestia's disapproving look, when Sunset reluctantly admitted she used real magic in front of a bunch of people, potentially jeopardized her secret. Following that was her wrestle with a group of high school rapists known as the Club. Much of the gathered pony's horror, Sunset explained how she'd been asked by the principal and vice principal to use her magic. Later, how she managed to save Twilight, Tavi, and indirectly Rarity before it had been too late. Princess Twilight, in particular, was scandalized as she saw Flash, Brad, Cedric do things she wouldn't have considered possible. Sunset couldn't help but notice tears in Twilight's eyes as her image of the boy she loved became as shattered as the wall Sunset had punched her in the restaurant. Probably best she knows the truth, Sunset thought, even as the purple princess furiously wiped at her eyes. Next was Sunset's adventures in L.A. President Sunset decided she should avoid mentioning the enigmatic La Musica, and the possibility she was in fact a transparent pony. She instead emphasized for emphasizing how she helped resolve the problems of both Octavia and Screwball. While it did embellish her ego slightly, the Mystery Musica Allegra paled in comparison to the next major topic, the Twilight's Nightmare Saga. Holy shit! I could certainly understand why you were out for my blood if you thought I was doing that! Raspberry gasped, horrified at the mirror's present glimpse to the bathroom, where Twilight's blood had been written to numerological signs. The poor teen herself, the scratches still fresh from being self-administered on her body, clutched Sunset for dear life. I honestly can't imagine what would have happened to her if you weren't there for her. Sunset took a deep breath before replying, I can't, unfortunately. And pretty soon you won't have to imagine either. More scenes played out, showing Twilight's continued descent into hopeless despair. The pony counterpart spoke up. Earlier, Raspberry told me what you concluded, and I can't help but feel the need to take full responsibility. If I had any idea that this would have happened— No! The mirror was going faster now, having skipped to ahead to the moment in time Twilight had finally broke. The moment of Twilight's exclamation, it looked for all the world that a giant wheeled vehicle was going to smash the teen in front of it. And only a randomized blur exited with light cyan magic for the briefest of moments saved her in the nick of time. I don't think I've been ever more terrified in my entire life than I was in that moment. Sunset confessed solemnly. If I had been even a fraction of a second slower, I don't think either of us would have made it. The memory caused Sunset's throat to clench up. It took all of her willpower to blink away the tears that threatened to spill forth all over again. A reassuring hoof on her shoulder, courtesy of Twilight, reminded her everything would be okay, and Sunset smiled appreciatively. The mirror moved on from Twilight's near suicide, as now Sunset was bidding her foster family farewell at the airport. With most of the family out of the country, and me having to stay at home to attend summer school, I had a perfect opportunity to study this weird mirror. It belonged to some ancient Italian guy, Baldassare di Canafanti. Sunset was certain she bought an Italian pronunciation. It's okay, Sunset, I probably did too. But carried on regardless. Allegedly, his mirror allowed him to converse with a black unicorn who taught him black magic or something. Black unicorn? Said Pinky. Are you saying this bald guy was having conversations with Sombra? Given that Sombra created this mirror, and as far as any of us can tell, was the only one to use it until recently, Deadpan asked as he stated the obvious. I guess he did. Bet no pony on the human side believes it, though. Not a word, since whatever Sombra taught Baldy could have been legitimate magic, explained Sunset. The only reason I could do any tricks on my own is because I am a unicorn. Even then, my magic is far more limited than it would normally be. It almost feels like something's holding me back. Sunset knows Princess Celestia gave a brief glance in her direction, or hastily returning her attention to the mirror. Though she was probably silly for doing so, Sunset couldn't help but analyze her old mentor's every movement, wondering if there was something more to the look she just gave her. The mirror's image changed again for what appeared to be the last time, as now shows Sunset, to everybody's surprise, Princess Celestia, inside what looked like a restricted area of a museum. Sunset was pushing a large painted protective glass away from in front of the mirror, and the display box holding the display's ruby. Wait a minute, said Raz, her tone growing dead serious. The ruby isn't in the mirror? Oh yeah, might have forgotten to mention that, Sunset answered seamlessly. The emerald and the diamond are also loose, if that's important. Important would be an understatement, remarked Raz, her eyes suddenly letting loose the dark magic fog they had been restrained until now. I'll explain later, but right now, I need all of you to go back outside immediately! The boys began looking around, growing increasingly nervous. A faint rumble sounded somehow. The intangible walls of darkness around What's wrong? Whimpered Fluttershy. The stability of the mirrors is more fragile than I thought. The fact that I've been pushing an ancient magical portal to do things it hasn't done for centuries with nothing but jury-rigged repairs isn't doing it any favors. But I need to shut it down now, or else reality might break so badly that Discord will be begging for a return to order, and I can't have you guys in here. Raspberry had already dropped her normal appearance, cut to drain her magic. Her voice reverberated as it did the other day as she sighed, So go! Everybody immediately obeyed, running at full gallop towards the edge of the dome as the whole world seemed to shake around them. Sunset was the last to go through the mirror when she stopped right at the edge to look at the mirror one last time. The faint image on the mirror was that of her summoning all her courage, stepping through it. The exact moment into Sunset and the mirror fast from view, Mirror herself simply dissipated the image like a TV turning off. And suddenly, Sunset felt a pure hope seize her effortlessly and yank her outside. You really need to stop obsessing over Mirror, Sunny, sighed Pinkie, gently putting Sunset down. The unicorn tried to comprehend how Pinkie Pie could have lifted her up, and then run on her hind legs all leaped back through the poem's wall. But between human Pinkie Pie doing similar feats, probably Pinkie having the excuse of natural Earth Pie strength, Sunset just opted not to try to solve that enigma. There's enough on her mind already. Oi, what's happening? Shouted Applejack, directing everybody's attention to the dome. Only now it was shrinking rapidly, though Raspberry and Sombra's mirror is still inside. It was anybody's guess what was going to happen when the dome vanished. Except when it did, there was absolutely nothing. Pony just arriving on the scene would have seen nothing different but would have been there several hours ago. Sunset took a step forward and looked around, a dark pale of worry forming her gut. Where's the mirror? Where's Raz? Our ponies followed suit, looking around with wide, frantic eyes as they called out, Raz! Boss! Raspberry Barrel! At the beginning of the week, Sunset had been convinced her dark reflection was nothing more than an enemy that needed to be destroyed. Raz! Yet here she was, calling her name and growing more and more worried when she didn't answer. Sunset's life was anything if not full of surprises. Phew, sighed Raspberry, emerging from her safe house in her normal disguise. That was a close one. Raz! Screamed her friends, only proceeding to cowpile on top of her with hugs, careful for her wounded leg. Sunset let out a received sigh, also glad to see Raspberry was okay. Given what she implied, the day's discoveries might end on a bittersweet note for the wayward Zimmer. Raspberry, is the mirror... we'll be able to go home? Yeah. Just give me a moment, laughed Farrell, wrestling free from the entanglement of wings and legs. Jeez, you guys are so clingy. Anyway, Sunset, the mirror's okay. I just need you guys out of there. Trying to keep everything stable is hard when there's more ponies in a sub-pocket of reality like that. Sunset and the others gave understanding nods, smiling now to the tension to pass. Now, while I do wish you told me about the stage of gems on the other side earlier, the connection between that one and Sombra is still strong enough to get you home, Raspberry said. Assuming Celestia lets her go at all, Rainbow Dash growled, giving Sunset a glare. Sunset swallowed as he looked away from Rainbow. It must have hurt to see a pony resembled a friend scrutinize her so severely. It wasn't Rainbow's opinion of her that mattered right now. Slowly, Sunset Simmer brought her eyes up to Celestia, who was currently preoccupied with celestial shards, and realized it was getting late in the evening. Their old mentor still had a job to do. Is there anything else you wish to say before I pass judgment? Celestia asked, as he willed the sun lower in the sky. Do you still regret all you have done? Unable to get a read on Celestia's thoughts, Sunset glanced away. She found her gaze resting on her own shadow, and suddenly remembered her earlier conversation with Celestia that sparked her uncertainty. In the orange light of the setting sun, Sunset's shadow stood tall and imposing, yet it only moved when she moved. When she raised a hoof, her shadow replied in kind. I am you. No, you're not me! You demon, Sunset. Sorry, little personal for a joke. Despite how large and scary her shadow appeared, she was still the one in control. No, Sunset answered. Only Carapolis looked at her in astonishment. Even Celestia's gaze fell from one sunset to another. Yes, I truly regret hurting you, along with everyone else, but I don't regret making mistakes. Because really, it's my mistakes who made me who I am today. Sure, if I never made them in the first place, I might still be at your side. But I'd also be the same mare I was before, power-hungry and selfish. Sunset gave her shadow another glance. No matter where I go, my past will always follow me. All that matters now is what I choose to do with it. And what I choose is to learn from it, so I might become a better person. By that time, Sunset was finished. Celestia completely lowered the sun. Looming shadow disappeared in the darkness of night. Sunset knew she was still there, but it wasn't so much a big of a presence now. The group of ponies remained silent for a while, chirping of crickets in the night, only sound that prevailed. Finally, Celestia turned to Sunset. Well spoken, Sunset. Sunset couldn't help but smile a little. Celestia's praise always made her feel a little warm. Thanks, Princess. Sunset smiled. Smile slowly failed as she cleared her throat. For the record, I still intend to take whatever punishment you have planned for me. But I really appreciate not being sent to the moon. I can't even begin to describe how much I'd like to stay on the ground. Celestia gave a slight smile. Now, why would I do that? Well, you have to punish me somehow, right? Sunset's mind started running laps, so her heart quickened to keep up. Is she not angry? I mean, there's no way you could just forgive me, right? Of course not, Celestia said stoically, dropping Sunset's heart down a dark pit of terror in her chest. At least until she had, because there's nothing to forgive. You know, the sad part is, this is way more heartwarming than anything in Sunset and Time. Just like that, Sunset's mind began racing to the ground, an abrupt halt. She went from thinking about 1,000 things at once to being unable to even focus on her own name. Well, what? I'll admit, your betrayal hurt me more than I could bear. It was for that reason I needed to be so cautious when you returned. I needed to be ejected in dealing with you, or else risk suffering that betrayal all over again. But Sunset, you need to know that even if I couldn't trust you, I could never hate you. Not even for a moment. Celestia's voice trembled as he tenderly brushed aside Sunset's mane, as he had so many times once he was a filly. Sunset saw her eyes glisten as he said, There's nothing to forgive, Sunset, because I've forgiven you years ago. Sunset's head spun, like she was some more wet dream. Any dream that she had about her own mentor had always been a nightmare. She had never heard the words that Celestia said now, because she never expected to hear them. Yet here she was, wondering when her dreams had suddenly felt more real than reality. Sunset's vision was clouded, and her eyes were filling with tears. This was everything she ever wanted, but never thought she deserved. Unable to contain herself a moment longer, Sunset felt her host launch into Celestia's own in a torrent of tears. I'm sorry. Sunset wailed as Celestia wrapped her up in a cocoon of 4 legs and wings. Celestia's warm embrace was bliss, and Sunset cried and sobbed like a foal. She was a messy, ugly sight. Princess Twilight was watching with all her friends, but Sunset never didn't care. She just let Celestia hold her closely. gently stroke her when he was feeling. Sunset wasn't sure how long they stayed like that. Time lost all meaning in Celestia's embrace. Nevertheless, when sunset was finally spent, it felt as if the weight of the world was lifted from her shoulders. A great tiredness washed over her whole body. Sunset meant only to close her eyes and rest for a moment. She felt so warm and safe in her old mentor's arms, she started to drift asleep. Before she knew it, Sunset was back in her guest bed in a super cute corner. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sunset fell asleep without a care in the world.